In the heart of Ibadan, faith is a daily compass for thousands, a source of hope, strength, and unity. Among them stands the House of Glory, a church that draws crowds beyond its walls, led by the magnetic Prophetess Fisayo. To many, she is a beacon of divine power, her name spoken with reverence, her touch said to heal the impossible. But on one fateful Sunday, as the congregation gathered in song and prayer, one woman sat quietly in the shadows. What she witnessed that day would unravel a chain of events that defied belief and raised questions too haunting to ignore. This is not just a story about faith. It's a story about trust, deception, and the unexpected paths that truths can take. Stay with us. In the bustling heart of Ibadan, there stood the House of Glory, a sanctuary so grand it towered above its surroundings, its golden cross gleaming under the morning sun. Every Sunday, the streets came alive with worshippers pouring in from all corners of the city. The air was thick with anticipation, the hum of voices and the rhythmic beat of drums blending into a symphony of devotion. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Rows upon rows of pews were filled with men, women, and children, their voices raised in jubilant praise. The choir, dressed in shimmering robes of blue and gold, sang with a harmony that seemed to transcend the walls of the church, touching every soul within. At the center of it all was Prophetess Fisayo, a woman whose reputation had spread far beyond Ibadan. Known as Aya Agbara, Mother of Power, her name carried weight in homes, markets, and gatherings across the region. To some, she was a healer, to others, a bridge between the divine and the earthly. As she entered the sanctuary, her presence commanded the room. Clad in flowing white robes embroidered with golden patterns, she walked with a grace that silenced the crowd, her smile both serene and commanding. For those gathered, she was more than a prophetess. She was a symbol of hope, a light in the darkness of their lives. But for one woman in the crowd that day, the sight of Fisayo would stir not adoration, but a seed of unease that would grow into something far more profound. The air inside the House of Glory was electric with expectation. The rhythmic clapping of hands and the melodic hum of the choir filled the sanctuary, each note carrying the collective hope of the congregation. At the center of the stage stood Prophetess Fisayo, her outstretched arms commanding attention. Her voice, calm yet powerful, echoed through the microphone. Today, we will witness the power of God at work. From the side of the altar, an usher guided a young girl to the front. The congregation leaned forward, eager to catch a glimpse of the child. Her name, as the prophetess announced, was Ajinola. The murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. She's been blind since birth. Her parents have tried everything. The whispers of sympathy and curiosity swelled as the girl stood hesitantly before Fisayo, her small hands clasped tightly in front of her. Fisayo knelt to the girl's level, her hands gently cupping Ajinola's face. "Do you believe God can heal you?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a tenderness that silenced the whispers. The girl nodded, her expression uncertain yet trusting. The prophetess rose, her robes flowing around her as she extended one hand toward the heavens and placed the other firmly on the girl's forehead. "In the name of Jesus," Fisayo declared, her voice rising with authority, "Open your eyes." The command echoed in the sanctuary, and a wave of silence followed. All eyes were on Ajinola. Slowly, she blinked once, then again. A third time. The silence broke as the girl suddenly exclaimed, her voice trembling with excitement, "I can see. I can see." Her hands shot up to cover her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. The congregation erupted into chaos. Cheers and shouts of "Hallelujah" filled the air. People leapt to their feet, clapping, dancing, and stomping in a frenzy of jubilation. Strangers embraced, tears of joy streaming down their faces. The choir broke into a triumphant hymn, their voices soaring above the clamor. Ushers struggled to maintain order as the crowd surged forward, desperate to touch Fisayo, to bask in what they believed was a divine moment. The air was charged with a fervor that seemed almost tangible, a collective high that none could resist. But in the midst of this chaos, one figure sat still. Blessing, seated at the far end of the church, watched the unfolding scene with an expression that betrayed neither joy nor disbelief. Her gaze was fixed on Ajinola, now encircled by a throng of worshippers offering praises and thanksgiving. Blessing's mind, however, was not on the celebration but on a memory, vivid and unmistakable. Just a week ago, she had seen Ajinola in her neighborhood. The young girl had been playing football, her movements swift and precise, her laughter ringing out as she chased the ball. She had never shown any signs of blindness. Blessing was certain of it. Her stomach churned as she struggled to reconcile what she knew with what she was witnessing. Was it possible she had been mistaken? Or was there another explanation for this so-called miracle? As the congregation surged forward to touch the prophetess's garment, Blessing remained seated, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Around her, the atmosphere was euphoric, but within her, a storm of doubt was brewing. Her eyes darted back to Ajinola, who now stood at the altar, her hands raised in a gesture of gratitude, tears still streaming down her face. The girl looked genuinely overjoyed. But something about the moment felt off. Blessing's unease deepened, her chest tightening with a mix of confusion and suspicion. She glanced around the room, wondering if anyone else shared her doubts. If they did, their faces betrayed nothing but awe and reverence. As the music swelled and the crowd's energy reached its peak, Blessing's thoughts grew louder. Could this really be a miracle, she wondered? Or am I witnessing something far more complicated than I can understand? Her instincts urged her to keep watching, to not let herself be swept away by the wave of emotion that had engulfed everyone else. Little did she know, her doubts would soon lead her down a path she could never have imagined. That night, as the city of Ibadan fell into its usual rhythm of quiet and calm, one person found no peace. Blessing lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind consumed by the events of the day. The joyous cries of the congregation still echoed in her ears, but they felt distant, hollow even. Her thoughts kept circling back to Ajinola, the girl who was supposedly blind but whom she had seen running and laughing just days before. The question swirled relentlessly. Was it all real? Or was it something else entirely? Blessing sat up, her chest heavy with unease. She reached for her Bible on the bedside table and opened it, but the words blurred before her eyes. Finally, she sank to her knees on the cold floor, her voice trembling as she prayed. God, she whispered, if this woman is truly sent by you, let me see the truth. But if she is not, show me what I need to do. Please, I need to understand. The silence in the room seemed to stretch on endlessly, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves outside her window. Minutes turned into hours, yet sleep would not come. Instead, an unfamiliar restlessness settled over her. It was as if something was calling her, pulling at her spirit. At first, she tried to ignore it, but the feeling grew stronger, more insistent, until she could no longer stay still. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, Blessing stepped out of her house into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, bathed in the silvery light of the moon. Shadows danced across the ground as she walked, her bare feet making soft sounds against the dusty road. She had no destination in mind, yet her legs moved with purpose, as if guided by an invisible force. The familiar streets of her neighborhood began to feel foreign, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. As she walked further, the surroundings grew darker, less familiar. Her heart pounded, but she felt compelled to continue. Soon, she found herself on a narrow path, shrouded in shadows and lined with dense trees. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. Blessing hesitated for a moment, looking over her shoulder. The world behind her seemed distant now, unreachable. Taking a deep breath, she pressed on. The path led her to a river she had never seen before. The water shimmered under the moonlight, its surface unnaturally still. A chill ran down her spine as she approached the edge. There was an eerie stillness in the air, broken only by the faint sound of her own breathing. For a moment, she stood there, questioning why she had come. But before she could turn back, a faint ripple disturbed the water. Blessing froze, her pulse quickening as she strained her eyes to see. Slowly, the ripples grew, and a figure began to emerge from the depths. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped back, her feet stumbling against the uneven ground. The figure became clearer under the moon's glow, and what she saw made her blood run cold. At that moment, every fiber of her being screamed for her to run. But her feet refused to move, rooted to the spot as if held by an unseen force. This was no ordinary night, and what Blessing had stumbled upon was no ordinary sight. The unease that had plagued her all day now gave way to a deep, bone-chilling fear. Yet, something told her that the answers she had prayed for were just beginning to reveal themselves. The stillness of the river was shattered as the ripples grew stronger, spreading outward like a silent warning. Blessing's breath quickened as she watched the surface of the water break, her wide eyes fixed on the emerging figure. At first, it seemed human, a silhouette of a woman rising slowly from the depths. But as the moonlight fell upon the figure, Blessing's world began to unravel. What stepped onto the shore was both familiar and otherworldly. The upper half of the figure was undeniably Prophetess Fisayo. Her white robes clung to her body, dripping with water, the intricate golden embroidery glinting under the pale light. Her face was serene, almost tranquil, but her eyes glowed with an unnatural yellow hue, piercing through the darkness. But it was the lower half that sent a cold wave of terror through Blessing's body. Where legs should have been, there was a massive, shimmering tail, covered in iridescent scales that reflected the moonlight in shades of green and gold. The tail coiled and uncoiled with an unnerving grace, leaving deep impressions in the muddy ground as it moved. This was no ordinary prophetess. This was something ancient, something unholy. Blessing's legs felt as if they would give way beneath her. She clutched a nearby tree for support, her body trembling with fear. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum in her ears. She wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but remain in the presence of this creature. Yet, something rooted her to the spot, a mix of fear and a desperate need to understand what she was seeing. Then, the sound began, a low, guttural chant in a language Blessing had never heard before. Fisayo's voice was melodic yet terrifying, carrying a power that seemed to ripple through the air. The river began to shimmer as if responding to her words, the water swirling in unnatural patterns. Blessing's hand instinctively reached for her phone, her fingers shaking as she unlocked the camera. She had no plan, no thought of what to do with the evidence, only the burning need to document this moment. With trembling hands, she began to record. Through the lens, she captured it all: the shimmering tail, the glowing eyes, the rhythmic sway of Fisayo's body as she chanted by the river's edge. Each second felt heavier than the last as Blessing's mind raced. Who would believe her? How could she explain what she was witnessing without sounding insane? The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she knew she could not live without proof. Then, the chanting stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, more terrifying than the eerie sounds that had preceded it. Fisayo's head tilted slightly, her glowing eyes scanning the surroundings. Blessing's breath caught in her throat as the prophetess's gaze slowly turned toward her hiding spot. The creature's piercing yellow eyes seemed to lock onto her, and a faint smile curled on her lips, one that sent shivers down Blessing's spine. Blessing froze, every instinct screaming at her to remain perfectly still. Her phone slipped slightly in her trembling hand, the faintest sound breaking the oppressive silence. She held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give her away. Had Fisayo seen her? The tension was unbearable, the seconds dragging on like an eternity. And then, a sudden movement. Fisayo's tail coiled tightly, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the darkness. Blessing knew she had seconds, just seconds, to decide whether to stay or run. Her pulse raced as her grip tightened on the phone. This was no longer just a question of belief. It was a question of survival. The story was far from over. And for Blessing, the answers she sought would come at a price she could never have imagined. The world seemed to stand still as Blessing crouched behind the tree, her breath shallow and controlled. Every muscle in her body was tense, her mind racing with one thought: escape. But how? The eerie glow from the river bathed the scene in an unnatural light, and Fisayo's glowing yellow eyes continued to search the darkness. Blessing couldn't tell if the prophetess had seen her or if the silence was just a cruel trick of her own mind. Slowly, inch by inch, Blessing began to step back, her movements deliberate and calculated. The sound of the leaves crunching under her feet felt deafening in the oppressive quiet. Every time she shifted, she froze, her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for a sign, any sign, that she had been discovered. But Fisayo remained still, her gaze scanning the area with an unnerving precision. The night seemed to hold its breath. Even the crickets, which had chirped incessantly before, now fell silent as if they too feared drawing attention. Blessing's fingers gripped her phone tightly, the faint glow from the screen barely illuminating her trembling hands. She prayed silently, desperate for guidance, for courage, for a way out. Suddenly, there was movement, a quick, fluid motion that made Blessing's blood run cold. Fisayo's tail coiled once more, her body shifting slightly toward the trees. Blessing's breath hitched, her heart racing as she pressed her back against the tree, trying to make herself as small as possible. Was she moving toward her? Or was it something else? The uncertainty was maddening. The silence grew heavier, more oppressive, as if the very air had turned against her. Blessing's mind screamed at her to run, to leave this place before it was too late. But her legs felt weak, her fear rooting her to the spot. As she weighed her options, her thoughts spiraled. If she ran, Fisayo would surely hear her. If she stayed, how much longer could she remain hidden? Finally, she took one last, careful step backward, her foot landing on a twig that snapped under her weight. The sound, though faint, shattered the stillness like a gunshot. Blessing froze, her eyes widening in terror as Fisayo's head whipped toward the noise. The glowing yellow eyes now seemed to pierce through the darkness, searching, probing. Blessing's pulse thundered in her ears, her body paralyzed with fear. This was no ordinary moment, no ordinary secret. Whatever Fisayo was hiding, it wasn't meant for mortal eyes. Blessing felt it deep in her soul. The creature before her was not just a prophetess, not just a woman. It was something far older, far more dangerous, and far beyond her understanding. Blessing clutched her phone tightly, her mind battling between two instincts: run or stay hidden. But no matter what choice she made, she knew this was just the beginning. Whatever she had witnessed tonight would not end here. It would follow her, haunt her, and perhaps even destroy her. The faint sound of the river continued to ripple in the distance, the only constant in a night that had shifted her entire reality. For now, Blessing remained frozen, caught between the shadows and the light, between fear and the need for answers. But deep down, she knew she was no longer safe. The story she had stumbled into was far from over, and the price of knowing the truth was yet to be revealed. As Blessing clung to the tree, her breath shallow and her body trembling, the air around her felt heavier, darker. Fisayo's glowing yellow eyes swept through the shadows, locking onto something, someone. Blessing froze, her heartbeat thunderous in her ears, as the serpent-like prophetess tilted her head, an eerie smile forming on her lips. The night seemed to stretch endlessly in that moment, every second thick with dread. What would happen next? Would she escape, or had her presence been discovered? For Blessing, the answers would only come with a heavy cost. But for now, she could only wait, helpless and terrified. What would you do if you were in Blessing's shoes? Would you run, or would you stand your ground and risk everything to uncover the truth? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts could be the key to understanding this tale. And if this story has captured your imagination, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss part 2 of this chilling journey, where Blessing's desperate attempt to expose the truth leads her to a revelation far more terrifying than she ever imagined. In the next chapter, Blessing's courage takes her deeper into the darkness as she tries to escape Fisayo's reach. But what she discovers will leave her, and you, questioning everything. Stay tuned. The story is far from over. The secrets of the House of Glory are only beginning to unravel, and the truth will challenge everything you think you know. Until next time.